One of the big events in the book is Kent State.
Yes.
And that, I mean, I think all of our listeners probably know what happened at Kent State. But you keep returning back to that event a couple times in the book. What I really like about this book, by the way, just to step back, is that you kind of you're able to kind of tell there's this sort of like long history that you kind of return to from all different angles and dimensions throughout the course of the book. And so as the book unfolds, you're sort of starting to see the same history like told over and over again from all these different perspectives, from all these different angles or different sort of narrative links, which make it very unique and interesting. You get a really like holistic, I mean, I feel like I got a very holistic understanding of Cleveland, of this like sense of place. But I want to talk specifically a little bit about Kent State because not only was that like that was a big event, obviously, in kind of turning the national sentiment of the war, but for Cleveland in particular, and for a lot of these figures in this book, in these kind of underground music scenes or whatever, this was like a defining moment. So maybe we can kind of like run through a little bit about what happened at Kent State and what that kind of did to the city.
Sure. Yeah, Kent is not in Cleveland. It's not even in the same county, but it's nearby. It's closer to Akron, which is Akron's interesting, and it's too big and too far away to be a suburb, but it's also too small to be thought of independently. People from Akron would disagree. It's kind of like a satellite city.
Yeah.
Sort of like how Tacoma is to like Seattle.
Yes. Yeah.
The home of LeBron James, but also the birthplace, people don't know this, of Steph Curry.
Interesting.
Same hospital.
Do you say that also because, like Akron, Tacoma has a unique smell about it? The aroma of Tacoma?
They used to say that you could smell the rubber in Akron.
Yeah.
Akron is where the Goodyear and all the tire plants were operated out of. So Akron had an industrial history as well, but it was entirely based on rubber. Akron, though, does have its own airport, unlike Tacoma, which shares it with Seattle, SeaTac.
So Kent State, though.
Kent State, yeah. So Kent State everyone knows what Kent State is, and it was a huge deal. But growing up, I think it had longer legs here because I'd hear about like a friend would say, "Oh, my mom was there. My mom was at Kent State," or like, "Oh, our history teacher, he went to Kent State." So you as a kid growing up here, you'd hear about it a lot, and it had this kind of weight to it. And I don't know when I learned that members of Devo were there and that Chrissy Hynde from the Pretenders was there. So then when you have that direct kind of punk and new wave connection to it, you have to talk about it. And also that punk kind of came out as a reaction to and a response to the collapse of the hippie counterculture. And boy, when you're talking about the death of the hippie ideal and movement, well, murdered students, shot by the government is a pretty blunt metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like almost even not a metaphor, right? It
isn't.
A total inflection point, and kind of this sort of like a switch got flipped almost, like, how you say, this sort of, folk hippie, we can all rah, take it on together, holding hands. A bunch of kids get shot by the National Guard, blood on national television, on the fucking sidewalk. And, the response was anger and this music that came out of it, right? This punk response. Like, let's talk about that.
Well, I think the immediate response was shock and numbness and almost a kind of it just killed it. It just killed the whole movement.
Yeah.
Kent was a very radicalized campus, and there was a lot of Weather Underground activity in Northeast Ohio. They were in Cleveland and they were in Kent. And my publishing partner, Jake, he's actually researching all that right now for a book of his own. You guys would love Jake. He's just a maniac with that shit. So yeah, Kent was very radical. And, after the shootings, it just shut down. The school shut down literally. There's no more class.
Yeah.
And everyone was just in a fog, and it was over. That was it. And then you have Charles Manson, who kind of shows up in the book.
And then prior to Kent, you had Altamont too, just like not even a year before, which is like it is like those two events really did like help, and Charles Manson really just helped kind of nail the like hippie counterculture's like door shut with a pile of bodies. I mean, it's really something.